Today I'm going to be talking about the two poems by Edwin Arlington Robinson. And just to reiterate, there was a lot going on during this time period. We had, the two world wars, and you had the Great Depression. So a lot of things were happening, and kind of everybody was kind of like disenchanted, and they were trying to make sense of like the world around them, and so a lot of that kind of flows into that modernist literature, and we're going to see that pretty heavily here in Edwin Arlington Robinson. So we're going to talk about Richard Cory first. Whenever Richard Cory went downtown, we people on the pavement looked at him. He was a gentleman from soul to crown, clean favored and imperially slim, and he was always quietly arrayed, and he was always human when he talked, but still he fluttered pulses when he said good morning, and he glittered when he walked. And he was rich, yes, richer than a king, and admirably schooled in every grace. And fine we thought that he was everything to make us wish that we were in his place. So on we worked, and waited for the light, and went without the meat, and cursed the bread. And Richard Cory, one calm summer night, went home and put a bullet through his head. So it's Richard Cory is kind of like the man who kind of has it all. And so the people of the town who are of clearly a lower financial class, they even call themselves we people on the pavement. We look up to him. We want to be him. They put him up on a pedestal. And he lowers himself to the level of the townspeople when he comes to town, when he goes downtown to among these people of the pavement. And again, these are the people defining these differences. It's not Richard Cory that is saying that he's above other people. The people themselves, they put him so high up on a pedestal that he is. They look up to him so much. And so everything about him is perfect, right? He's a gentleman from soul to crown. He's clean favored. He's imperially slim. He's quietly arrayed. He's always human when he talks. He flutters pulses when he says good morning. He glitters when he walks. He's wealthy. He's schooled in every grace. Everything about him is uh, it he's just a whole other level, and everybody wishes that they were him. It says in fine, we thought that he was everything to make us wish that we were in his place. Oddly enough, connotation here in those two stanzas, the second and the third stanza, we have that this noble royal man. Richard was a common name for many of the kings. The word Richard also contains the word rich. You see the words crown, imperial, and grace, which all suggest royalty. So everything about the diction that Arlington Robinson is using is to place this man above the others. Okay, so he's perfect, Richard Cory. He's perfect. He's admired and respected. However, in the end, as they are going on with their life and working, or their life and working and waiting for the morning and going without, um, Richard Cory, who has everything, goes home and puts a bullet in his head. So it shows the townspeople that wealth and status really don't ensure happiness. And just because you seem to have it all doesn't necessarily mean that you do have it all and that you have it all together. Okay. All right. Switching gears to Miniver Chivi. I've always liked this one. So we've got this dramatic lyric poem. Okay. 20th century misfit man who is living in the wrong time. Okay, let's read it and then we'll discuss. Miniver Chivi, child of scorn, grew lean while he assailed the seasons. He wept that he was ever born, and he had reasons. Miniver loved the days of old, when swords were bright and steeds were prancing. The vision of a warrior bold would set him dancing. Miniver sighed for what was not, and dreamed and rested from his labors. He dreamed of Thebes and Camelot and Priam's neighbors. Miniver mourned the ripe renown that made so many names so fragrant. He mourned romance, now on the town, and art a vagrant. Miniver loved the Medici, albeit he had never seen one. He would have sinned incessantly could he have been one. Miniver cursed the commonplace, and out of khaki suit with loathing, he missed the medieval grace of iron clothing. Miniver cursed the commonplace. I'm sorry, I just read that same one. Miniver scorned the gold he sought, but sore annoyed was he without it. Miniver thought and thought and thought and thought about it. Miniver Cheevy, born too late, scratched his head, and kept on thinking. Miniver coughed and called it fate and kept on drinking. So, Miniver, the title, Miniver Chibi, has a really interesting meaning. Historically, in the medieval age, a miniver was a fur of white or spotted white and gray that was used for linings and trimmings on robes that your royalty would wear. If you've seen pictures from the medieval period where they would have the stuff fur around their neck and it would be white with spots. That was a miniver. And then also, um, chivi resembles the French noun cheval, which means horse, or chevalier, which means an armed knight mounted on a horse. So the name kind of suggests that he is in the wrong time. It could be associated with a royal or chivalry and that kind of thing. It's also been suggested that Miniver Cheevy is a minimum achiever, which all he does is spend his time thinking about the past instead of living in the present, and he's mute to do anything about it. Like he refuses um, to get off his, out of his head and live in the now. So we have Miniver Cheevy, a man who is immediately linked there in that first line, child of scorn. Um, he's stricken by poverty. He's described as lean and slim because he does not have enough to eat. And he is bitter. He wishes that he'd never been born. He has obviously that makes him lament that. He cries about that. He weeps that he was ever born. And there at the end, he has his reasons. He has his reasons for the way that he feels. And so we're going to see in the following stanzas Robinson present those reasons that Miniver Cheevy is in so much pain. So, second stanza, Miniver loved the days of old when swords were bright and steeds were prancing. The vision of a warrior bold would set him dancing. So, he is miserable, but he does like one thing: the days of old. He likes the past. So, and he doesn't like just the recent past. He's talking about historical time periods, back to the medieval times, back to the Renaissance period with the Medici family um, and that kind of thing. So, and Chibi likes swords. He likes steeds. With their no their warriors mounted with warriors and those visions um, uh, they make him dance. They make him dance as he thinks about those ancient warriors and their in all their armor mounted on their horses, and he longs for that time where when people worshipped those knights and warriors. So in the third stanza he says, Miniver sighed for what was not and dreamed and rested from his labors. So thinking about the past is a hard job for Chibi. He doesn't have time for anything else. Like all he does is sit around and think, and it exhausts him. It makes him sigh, and it's kind of like a heavy mental burden. But um, those last two lines of that stanza, he dreams of Thebes and Camelot, and Priam. So we have a couple of allusions there to King Arthur's court and Camelot. Thebes was a city in ancient Greece. And then we have the last Trojan king, who was Priam. If you'll think back to the fall of Troy, and Achilles and all of that, Priam was the last king of Troy before its fall. And so those three historical time periods are things that make Miniver happy, but he's not really interested in fact. Because a lot of those places are kind of surrounded by a lot of mythology, and a lot of romantic notions and ideals moreover than like the actual true histories. Okay, so he likes that classicism like Greece and that kind of thing, but he also likes those folk tales that came out of those times. Like, was Camelot even real? Not really, but it he enjoys that folk tradition. In stanza 4, Miniver mourned the ripe renown that made so many names so fragrant. He mourned romance now on the town and art a vagrant. So he's using the metaphor of the ripe fruit to compare it with antiquity. And he misses that time so much that it's almost like uh, it like sweet smelling flowers. Like, that is what he thinks about when he thinks about the past and past people. He also laments the idea that romance, or mourns the idea that romance has been forgotten now in this modern age, and also art that is vagrant or homeless. Like, there's no more of that classical historical art. Miniver led the Medici, which is the Medici family. It was an Italian banking family that kind of had a monopoly during the Renaissance, a political dynasty. Um, they were like 15th century Florence, Italy. And he's attracted to them because they were so wealthy and so powerful. But he didn't know any of them. He'd never seen one. And it didn't stop him from idealizing them or wishing that he could have been one. Stanza 6. It kind of exposes like the contradictions. The begins to kind of expose his contradictions. Miniver cursed the commonplace and eyed a khaki suit with loathing. He missed the medieval grace of iron clothing. So he's talking about he doesn't like the ordinary fashion of modern times, the khaki suits. He misses the iron clothing and the grace, which, hello, the iron suits of armor were so heavy. There was nothing graceful about the way that soldiers moved back in the medieval period with those heavy suits of armor, and they weren't comfortable. In stanza 7, Miniver scorned the gold he sought, but sore annoyed was he without it. Miniver thought and thought and thought and thought about it. So he's kind of inconsistent here. He likes to be rich, and then the fact that he's not rich bothers him. And then on the other hand, he looks down upon the wealth. He compares the past to gold there. But he's confused. He's confused about these contradictory ideas. Um, and he does nothing but think about it. He thought and thought and thought and thought about it. That's called a polylogy when you repeat. That's a literary device that he's repeating that same word over and over and over again. It's cyclical in nature. And then the last stanza there, Miniver Chivi, born too late, scratched his head and kept on thinking. Miniver coughed and called it fate and kept on drinking. So he is born too late. He's realized that he was born in the wrong time. So he does literally nothing about it. He is unable to see a solution. He's unwilling to see a solution. So what does he do? He keeps on drinking and sitting and thinking about the past. Um, and he's going to be fated for a miserable life, because he cannot fix the situation. He won't take the responsibility of making it better.